Most people move through life with a quiet assumption they've never questioned, that time is a straight line, that it begins somewhere behind them, stretches through this present moment, and disappears into a future they have yet to reach. And because of that belief, they live as though their dreams are always ahead, always distant, always something to chase. But what if that assumption is the very thing keeping you from what you seek? Time is not what you think it is. It is not a rigid sequence of moments marching forward. It is not something you are trapped inside of. In truth, all states of being already exist now. Your past, your present, and what you call your future are not separate compartments. They are different expressions of consciousness, all available in this very moment. There is a version of you who has already become everything you desire to be. That version is not waiting to be created, it is waiting to be occupied. You do not move through time to reach that person. You move in consciousness. This is where everything begins to shift. Because if your future already exists, then your work is no longer to chase it, force it, or struggle toward it. Your only task is to align yourself with it, to become aware of being that person now. Think of it this way. Reality is like a vast field of possibilities, and every possible version of your life already has its own existence. The version of you who is confident, successful, fulfilled, that is not a fantasy. It is a reality that exists on a different level of awareness. And the moment you assume the feeling of that reality, you begin to step into it. You are not waiting for the future to arrive. The future is waiting for you to recognize it. This is why effort alone never seems to be enough. You can work hard, push forward, and still feel like something is missing. Because no amount of external action can take you to a state of being you have not accepted internally. Action follows identity, not the other way around. When you understand that time is not your barrier, something within you relaxes. The urgency fades, the pressure dissolves. You no longer feel as though you are racing against a clock, trying to make it happen before it's too late. Instead, you realize that what you seek is already present, already formed, already yours in essence. And from that realization, a new way of living emerges. You begin to choose your thoughts more carefully, not because you are trying to be positive, but because you understand that every thought is a movement in consciousness. Every feeling is a step into a state, and every state carries with it a corresponding reality. So instead of asking, how long will this take, you begin to ask, who am I being right now? Because that is the only question that truly matters. If you continue to identify with the version of yourself who is waiting, doubting, and searching, then that is the reality you will continue to experience. But if you dare to assume, even for a moment, that you are already the person you wish to be, something profound begins to happen. Your perception shifts, your reactions change, opportunities appear differently, and life begins to mirror back to you that inner transformation. You are not bound by time, you are selecting from it. And the moment you understand this, you stop chasing your future and you step into it. Now, once you begin to sense that your future is not something distant, but something already present, the next realization follows naturally. Your reality is not shaping you, you are shaping it through the state you occupy. Most people believe they are responding to life. They believe the world dictates how they feel, how they think, and who they become. When circumstances are good, they feel elevated. When circumstances are difficult, they feel diminished. In this way, they live as though they are at the mercy of external conditions, constantly adjusting themselves to what appears before them. But this is the great misunderstanding. It is not the outer world that determines your state. It is your state that determines the outer world. What you experience is not an objective reality happening to you. It is a reflection of the inner position you have accepted as true. Your state is more than just a mood or a passing emotion. It is the sum total of what you believe about yourself, what you assume to be possible, and what you feel to be real. It is the lens through which everything in your life is interpreted and expressed. If you see yourself as uncertain, life will present you with reasons to doubt. If you see yourself as unworthy, you will encounter situations that seem to confirm that belief. Not because the world is against you, but because your state is projecting a pattern that reality faithfully reflects. You are not reacting to life, you are revealing your state through it. This is why two people can stand in the same environment and experience entirely different realities. One sees opportunity, the other sees limitation. One feels empowered, the other feels trapped. The difference is not in the world around them, it is in the state within them. And here is where your power truly lies. If your state creates your experience, then you are not bound to wait for circumstances to change. You do not need permission from the outside world to feel confident, fulfilled, or secure. You can choose your state now, independent of what your senses are telling you. This does not mean ignoring reality, it means understanding its source. When you deliberately assume a new state, you begin to think from it rather than of it. You no longer look at confidence as something you hope to gain. You begin to feel as though it is already yours. You no longer chase success as something outside of you. You embody the certainty of being successful. And as you remain in that state, something remarkable happens. Your outer world begins to reorganize itself to match your inner assumption. People respond differently. Opportunities appear where there were none before. What once felt distant begins to feel natural. This is not coincidence. This is law. Your state is the cause. Your reality is the effect. But most people never test this for themselves. They continue to wait for evidence before they allow themselves to change. They say, when things improve, I will feel better. When I succeed, I will become confident. And in doing so, they keep themselves locked in the same cycle, because they are trying to reverse the order of creation. You must become first. You must feel it real within yourself, before it can take form in your world. Not forcefully, not with strain, but with a quiet, steady acceptance of being. And yes, at first it may feel unfamiliar. You may be tempted to return to old patterns, to old ways of thinking. But persistence in your chosen state is what stabilizes it. The more you return to it, the more natural it becomes, until it no longer feels like something you are practicing, but something you are. And when that happens, your reality cannot remain the same. Because the world does not respond to what you want, it responds to who you are being. Change your state, and you change your world. As you begin to understand that your state shapes your reality, another truth reveals itself, one that many resist at first, yet it explains why so many desires seem to remain just out of reach. You do not attract what you want, you attract what you are. This may seem subtle, but it changes everything. Desire by itself is not creative power. Wanting something does not bring it into being. In fact, when you remain in a state of wanting, you are continually affirming that what you seek is not yours. And so life reflects that very condition back to you. Not the fulfillment of your desire, but the experience of longing for it. You may say, I want success, I want love, I want abundance, but if beneath those words there is a feeling of lack, of absence, of not yet having, then that is the state you are occupying. And that is the state that must express itself in your world. The outer world does not respond to your words, it responds to your being. This is why two people can desire the same thing, take similar actions, and yet experience completely different outcomes. One moves with a quiet certainty, as though what they seek is already unfolding. The other moves with tension, doubt, and the underlying fear that it may never happen. Though their actions may appear similar, their states are entirely different, and it is the state that determines the result. You must understand this clearly. Your identity is the magnet, not your desire. If you see yourself as someone who is striving, hoping, and waiting, then no matter how much effort you apply, you will continue to experience life from that position. You will always feel as though you are reaching for something just beyond your grasp. But if you begin to see yourself as the one who already is, something shifts at the deepest level of your being. You are no longer trying to get, you are expressing what you are. This is the difference between chasing and embodying. Chasing implies separation. It assumes that what you seek is outside of you, somewhere in the distance, requiring time, effort, and struggle to obtain. But embodiment dissolves that distance. It brings the experience into the present moment by changing who you are being. When you embody the state of the one who has, your thoughts change, your reactions change, your expectations change. You no longer look at life through the eyes of someone who is lacking. You begin to perceive it from the perspective of fulfillment. And from that place, your actions become effortless expressions rather than forced attempts. Consider how a person who feels truly confident moves through the world. They do not try to convince themselves of their worth in every moment. They do not seek constant validation. Their behavior flows naturally from their self-concept. In the same way, when you assume the identity of the one who already has what you desire, your life begins to reflect that assumption without strain. This is not about pretending. It is about accepting a new level of reality within yourself. At first, your senses may argue, They may show you evidence that contradicts your assumption, but your senses only reflect your previous state. They do not define your present choice. If you remain faithful to your new identity, if you persist in feeling it as real, the outer world must eventually conform, because it has no other choice. You cannot continue to be something inwardly without it expressing outwardly. It is law. It is the way reality unfolds. So instead of asking, "How do I get what I want?" begin to ask, "Who must I be to experience this as natural?" And then quietly, without force, step into that state. Not tomorrow, not when conditions change, now, because the moment you become it within, the need to chase it disappears, and soon after, so does the distance between you and it. Once you begin to grasp that you are not attracting from desire but expressing from identity, you will start to notice something you may have overlooked your entire life: the quiet, constant activity of your imagination. What you have called daydreaming, what you may have dismissed as idle thought, is in truth one of the most powerful forces available to you. Imagination is not fantasy. It is not an escape from reality. It is the very doorway into it. Every experience you have ever had was first accepted within you in some form. Before anything becomes visible, it is first conceived in consciousness, and the language of that consciousness is imagination. It is through imagination that you preview, select, and occupy different states of being. When you imagine something vividly, you are not merely thinking about it, you are experiencing it at a deeper level. The body responds, the emotions follow, and in that moment you are no longer separate from what you are imagining. You are participating in it. This is why the distinction between what is real and what is imagined is not as clear as you have been taught to believe. To your inner being, what is felt and accepted as true carries creative power, regardless of whether it has yet appeared in your outer world. So when you consistently imagine yourself as lacking, struggling, or uncertain, you are not just passing time, you are rehearsing a reality. And that rehearsal, repeated often enough, becomes the script your life begins to follow. But the same principle works in your favor the moment you become aware of it. If imagination is the gateway, then you are no longer limited to reacting to what already exists. You can begin to enter into the state of what you desire, not as something distant, but as something present and alive within you. You do not need permission to imagine yourself as successful, fulfilled, or complete. You do not need evidence from the outer world to justify it. You simply need the willingness to accept that what you experience inwardly has meaning, has substance, and has the potential to express itself outwardly. When you sit quietly and allow yourself to feel a scene that implies your wish is already fulfilled, something subtle begins to happen. You are no longer thinking of it, you are thinking from it. You begin to feel as though it is real, not in some distant future, but now. And that feeling is the bridge. It connects your present awareness to the version of reality where your desire is already fact. It dissolves the sense of separation and replaces it with a quiet knowing. Not a forced belief, not an attempt to convince yourself, but a natural recognition that this state is available to you. The more you return to this inner experience, the more familiar it becomes. It begins to feel less like something you are practicing and more like something you are remembering. And as it becomes familiar, it begins to influence your outer life in ways you may not immediately notice. Your reactions shift. Your decisions align differently. You are drawn to certain actions without strain. And life begins to arrange itself in ways that reflect the inner picture you have accepted. This is not coincidence. It is the outpicturing of what you have already experienced within. So do not underestimate the moments you spend in imagination. Do not dismiss them as unproductive or unreal. Those moments are shaping the very structure of your future experience. They are selecting which version of reality you will step into. Use them wisely. Enter into the state you desire, not as a visitor, but as one who belongs there. Feel it, accept it, and return to it often. Not with effort, but with ease. Because imagination is not showing you what could be, it is revealing what already is, waiting for you to step into it. As you continue to work with imagination and begin to occupy states consciously, there is something you must also come to understand, because without it, many will begin the journey and yet feel as though nothing is changing. Between your present awareness and your fulfilled desire, there is often one invisible obstacle: resistance. And resistance is not something outside of you. It is not the world pushing back. It is not fate delaying you. It is the inner tension created when you hold two conflicting states at once. On one side, you imagine the fulfillment. You feel it. You taste it. You step into it. But on the other side, you continue to carry doubt, fear, old memory, and habitual thought patterns that whisper, "This is not real yet. This is not possible yet. This is not who you are." And so within you there is a division. One part of you is stepping forward, while another part is pulling you back. That division is resistance, and it is the only thing that creates the experience of delay. Most people misunderstand delay. They think something external is taking time to organize itself. But time is not the true factor. Alignment is. When there is inner conflict, your experience feels fragmented. You move forward in imagination, but retract in feeling. You affirm possibility, but return to doubt. And in that inconsistency, your outer world appears to pause, not because it is refusing you, but because you are not yet steady in what you have chosen. This is why persistence is not optional. It is essential. Not forceful persistence, not desperate repetition, but a gentle, consistent return to the state you have chosen, until it becomes more natural to you than the old one. Resistance always weakens when it is no longer fed. Every time you entertain doubt, you strengthen the old state. Every time you dwell in fear, you reinforce separation. But every time you return calmly, quietly, deliberately to the feeling of fulfillment, you dissolve resistance layer by layer. And here is something important. Resistance often intensifies just before it fades. When you first begin to change your inner state, the old patterns may become louder. Doubts may surface more strongly. External circumstances may even appear to contradict your new assumption. But this is not failure. This is simply the old state losing its dominance. It resists because it is being replaced. But if you remain steady, something remarkable happens. The noise begins to quiet. The tension begins to dissolve. What once felt like effort begins to feel like natural being. You no longer have to remind yourself who you are becoming. You simply are. This is the point where time seems to collapse. What once felt distant begins to feel close. What once felt uncertain begins to feel inevitable. Not because the outer world suddenly changed, but because your inner alignment has stabilized. And in that stability, resistance has no place to survive. You must also understand that resistance is often disguised as logic. It speaks in reasonable tones. It tells you to be realistic. It urges you to wait for proof. It demands evidence before belief. But that voice is always anchored in the old state, the version of you that has not yet accepted transformation. If you obey it, you remain where you are. But if you gently disregard it, not by fighting it, but by refusing to give it authority, you begin to loosen its grip. You do not argue with resistance, you outgrow it. And you outgrow it by choosing again and again to return to your imagined fulfillment, to feel it, to live in it inwardly, to let it become more real than the noise of doubt. Eventually, something shifts. The inner conflict disappears. The divided mind becomes a unified one. And when there is no longer resistance within, there is no delay without. Because nothing stands between you and your expression except your own divided attention. When that division ends, manifestation is no longer a process. It becomes a natural unfolding, and everything you once struggled toward begins to meet you effortlessly. When resistance begins to fade and imagination becomes more real to you than circumstance, something very important naturally follows. You begin to understand that nothing outside of you is asking to change first. It is you who must change. Not in effort, not in struggle, but in being. You must become the person who already occupies the reality you seek. This is the final and most important realization. You are not waiting for life to give you permission. You are not waiting for signs, conditions, or timing to align before you begin. The moment you accept that your inner state is the source of your outer experience, responsibility returns to where it has always belonged, with you. But this is not a burden, it is freedom. Because if everything begins within you, then everything is available to you now. Most people live in a constant state of delay. They say, when I get the opportunity, then I will feel confident. When I achieve success, then I will be fulfilled. When love arrives, then I will become loving. And so they place their power in the future, always waiting for an external event to justify an internal shift. But life does not work in that order. You do not become something after it arrives. You arrive because you have already become it. So the question is never when will it happen. The question is, who am I being right now? If you are still being the version of yourself that waits, doubts, and hopes, then you are still aligned with waiting, doubt, and hope. But if you decide quietly, firmly, without needing proof to embody the version of you who already has, everything begins to reorganize around that decision. And this embodiment is not imagination alone. It becomes living from that state in your daily awareness. It is how you walk, how you respond, how you interpret what happens around you. It is a subtle but powerful shift in identity. You stop asking life to change, and you start expressing the one who has already changed within. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. You may still see old patterns in your environment. You may still hear echoes of your previous identity in your thoughts. But you do not return to them. You observe them without agreement. You let them pass without ownership. Because you are no longer the observer of lack, you are the expression of fulfillment. And as you persist in this, something remarkable begins to happen. Your inner assumption begins to feel natural. What once required effort becomes effortless. What once felt like pretending becomes knowing, and that knowing becomes your new foundation. From this point, life does not feel like something happening to you. It feels like something unfolding through you. You begin to notice that opportunities appear without strain. Conversations align in unexpected ways. Decisions feel guided rather than forced. And what once seemed distant begins to feel like it was always moving toward you. This is not coincidence. It is the reflection of a stabilized identity. Because reality is never responding to your wishes. It is responding to your state of being. So when you become the version of yourself who already lives in the end, you no longer need to chase the middle. You no longer need to question the process. You simply continue being, and everything else adjusts accordingly. And this is where all struggle ends, not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer defined by them. You are no longer reacting from uncertainty. You are no longer trying to become, you are being. And in that state of being, everything you once sought begins to appear not as something new, but as something finally recognized. Because you did not go anywhere. You became it.